But this pleasant time did not last. There came an evening when Lucy, gazing idly astern at the long furrow or wake they were leaving behind them, saw a great rack of clouds building itself up in the west with amazing speed. The gap was torn in it, and a yellow sunset poured through the gap. All the waves behind them seemed to take on unusual shapes, and the sea was a drab or yellowish color like dirty canvas. The air grew cold. The ship seemed to move uneasily as if she felt danger behind her. The sail would be flat and limp one minute, and wildly full with the next. While she was noting these things and wondering at a sinister change, which had come over the very noise of the wind, Drinian cried, "All hands on deck!" In a moment, everyone became frantically busy. The hatches were battened down, the galley fire was put out, men aloft to reef the sail. Before they had finished, the storm struck them. It seemed to Lucy that a great valley in the sea opened just before their bows, and they rushed down into it, deeper down than she would have believed possible. A great grey hill of water, far higher than the mast, rushed to meet them. It looked certain death, but they were tossed to the top of it. Then the ship seemed to spin around. A cataract of water poured over the deck. The poop and forecastle were like two islands with a fierce sea between them. Up aloft, the sailors were lying out along the yard, desperately trying to get control of the sail. A broken rope stood sideways in the wind, as straight and stiff as if it were a poker. "Get below, ma'am," bellowed Drinian, and Lucy, knowing that landsmen and landswomen are a nuisance to the crew, began to obey. It was not easy. The Dawn Treader was listing terribly to starboard, and the deck sloped like a roof of a house. She had to clamber round the top of the ladder, holding on to the rail, and then stand by while two men climbed up it, and then get down it as best she could. It was well she was already holding on tight, for at the foot of the ladder another wave roared across the deck up to her shoulders. She was already almost wet through with spray and rain, but this was colder. Then she made a dash for the cabin door, and got in and shut out for a moment the appalling sight of the speed with which they were rushing into the dark, but not, of course, the horrible confusion of creakings, groanings, snappings, clatterings, roarings, and boomings, which only sounded more alarming below than they had done on the poop. And all the next day it went on. It went on till one could hardly even remember a time before it had begun. And there always had to be 3 men at the tiller, and it was as much as 3 could do to keep any kind of a course. And there always had to be men at the pump, and there was hardly any rest for anyone, and nothing could be cooked, and nothing could be dried, and one man was lost overboard, and they never saw the sun. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Faithful Fables. Today we will continue our voyage into uncharted waters on the Dawn Treader. Before we get into this, remember to leave a rating and comment on this episode. This will help the show get in front of more people. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you comment and hit the like button, and if you'd like, subscribe. On the last episode of Faithful Fables, we received our very first comment, and I promised you guys that I would read comments on future episodes, and so here it is. So Michelle on Spotify says, "How exciting! I enjoy your take on this book. I look forward to following you along on this journey." Thank you, Michelle. I'm excited to have you along on the journey. This is going to be a good episode in my opinion, and so I am happy to have you here. And now, I want to just make a disclaimer on this episode. It may sound a little different. All right. I don't know if it will sound like that to you guys, but I know throughout the editing process, something sounded a little off as far as the voice recording. And so I just want to be upfront about it. I don't know what's going on, but it's a thing. And so, anyways, we are back on the sea after 3 weeks on the lone islands. And Lucy felt like, or feels like, the most fortunate girl in the world. She wakes up to see the reflection of the water on her ceiling, and she gets and she actually got a lot of new things while on the lone islands. She got sea boots and buskins, cloaks, jerkins, scarves, and the water seemed to be brighter blue every morning, and the air seemed to be warmer day by day. So Lucy also enjoys playing chess with Reepicheep in the stern while on the sea. But the chess pieces are too big for Reepicheep, and when he makes a move close to the middle of the board, he goes on his tiptoes. And Reepicheep is a good chess player, but when he remembers what he's actually doing. And while we're on the sea, suddenly, Drinian calls all hands on deck. And yeah, that means you too. Let's go. There's a storm coming, and he wants us all to know. The storm has now been going on for a couple of days. And it's all been going well until, well, as the book puts it, one could hardly even remember a time before it had begun. We have also unfortunately lost a man overboard. Now, during this time of the storm, Eustace makes 9 diary entries, which, yes, I will read those to you. And I'm just going to do them all back to back. Luckily for us, Eustace actually dates them, so it will be a little bit easier to remember. September 3rd. The first day for ages when I have been able to write. We had been driven before a hurricane for 13 days and nights. I know that because I kept a careful count, though the others all say it was only 12. Pleasant to be embarked on a dangerous voyage with people who can't even count right. I have had a ghastly time. Up and down enormous waves, hour after hour, usually wet to the skin, and not even an attempt at giving us proper meals. Needless to say, there's no wireless or even a rocket, so no chance of signaling anyone for help. It all proves what I keep on telling them, the madness of setting out in a rotten little tub like this. It would be bad enough even if one was with decent people instead of fiends in human form. Caspian and Edmund are simply brutal to me. The night we lost our mast, there's only a stump left now. Though I was not at all well, they forced me to come on deck and work like a slave. Lucy shoved her oar in by saying that Reepicheep was longing to go, only he was too small. I wonder she doesn't see that everything that little beast does is all for the sake of showing off. Even at her age, she ought to have that amount of sense. Today, the beastly boat is level at last, and the sun's out, and we have all been jawing about what to do. We have food enough, pretty beastly stuff most of it, to last for 16 days. The poultry were all washed overboard. Even if they hadn't been, the storm would have stopped them laying. The real trouble is water. 2 casks seem to have got a leak knocked in them and are empty. Narnian efficiency again. On short rations, half a pint a day each, we've got enough for 12 days. there's still lots of rum and wine, but even they realize that would only make them thirstier. If we could, of course, the sensible thing would be to turn west at once and make for the Lone Islands. But it took us 18 days to get where we are, running like mad with a gale behind us. Even if we got on east wind, it might take us far longer to get back. And at present, there's no sign of an east wind. In fact, there's no wind at all. As for rowing back, it would take far too long, and Caspian says the men couldn't row on half a pint of water a day. I'm pretty sure this is wrong. I tried to explain that perspiration really cools people down, so the men would need less water if they were working. He didn't take any notice of this, which is always his way when he can't think of an answer. The others all voted for going on in the hope of finding land. I felt it my duty to point out that we didn't know there was any land ahead, and tried to get them to see the dangers of wishful thinking. Instead of producing a better plan, they had the cheek to ask me what I proposed. So I just explained coolly and quietly that I had been kidnapped and brought away on this idiotic voyage without my consent, and it was hardly my business to get them out of their scrape. September 4th. Still becalmed. Very short rations for dinner, and I got less than anyone. Caspian is very clever at helping and thinks I don't see. Lucy, for some reason, tried to make up to me by offering me some of hers, but that interfering prig Edmund wouldn't let her. Pretty hot sun, terribly thirsty all evening. September 5th. Still becalmed and very hot. Feeling rotten all day, and am sure I've got a temperature. Of course, they haven't the sense to keep a thermometer on board. September 6th. A horrible day. I woke up in the night knowing I was feverish and must have a drink of water. Any doctor would have said so. Heaven knows I'm the last person to try to get an unfair advantage, but I never dreamed that this water rationing would be meant to apply to a sick man. In fact, I would have woken the others up and asked for some, only I thought it would be selfish to wake them. So I just got up and took my cup and tiptoed out of the black hole we slept in, taking great care not to disturb Caspian and Edmund, for they've been sleeping badly since the heat and the short water began. I always try to consider others, whether they are nice to me or not. I got out all right into the big room, if you can call it a room, where the rowing benches and the luggage are. The thing of water is at the end. All was going beautifully, but before I'd drawn a cupful, who should catch me but that little spy, Reap? I tried to explain that I was going on deck for a breath of air. The business about the water had nothing to do with him, and he asked me why I had a cup. He made such a noise that the whole ship was roused. They treated me scandalously. I asked, as I think anyone would have, why Reepicheep was sneaking about the water cask in the middle of the night. He said that he was too small to be any use on deck. He did sentry over the water every night so that one more man could go to sleep. Now comes their rotten unfairness. They all believed him. Can you beat it? I had to apologize, or the dangerous little brute would have been at me with his sword. And then Caspian showed up in his true colors as a brutal tyrant and said out loud for everyone to hear that anyone found stealing water in future would get 24. I didn't know what this meant till Edmund explained it to me. It comes in the sort of books those Pevensies kids read. After this cowardly threat, Caspian changed his tune and started being patronizing. Said he was sorry for me and that everyone felt just as feverish as I did, and we must all make the best of it, etc., etc. Odious stuck-up prig. Stayed in bed all day today. September 7th. A little wind today, but still from the west. Made a few miles eastward with part of the sail, set on what Drinian calls the jury mast. That means the bowsprit set upright and tied. They called it lashed, to the stump of the real mast. Still terribly thirsty. September 8th. Still sailing east. I stay in my bunk all day now and see no one except Lucy till the two fiends come to bed. Lucy gives me a little of her water ration. She says girls don't get as thirsty as boys. I had often thought this, but it ought to be more generally known at sea. September 9th. Land in sight. A very high mountain, a long way off to the southeast. September 10th. The mountain is bigger and clearer, but still a long way off. Gulls again today for the first time since I don't know how long. September 11th. Caught some fish and had them some dinner. Dropped anchor about 7 p.m. in 3 fathoms of water in a bay of this mountainous island. That idiot Caspian wouldn't let us go ashore because it was getting dark and was afraid of savages and wild beasts. Extra water ration tonight. There we have it. Eustace's diary entries during this time. And he says that he considers others whether they're nice to him or not. But I think he's proven that that's not the case. He's still, even what he considers being considerate to others, is still very self-centered on his part. He also describes Caspian as a brutal tyrant, patronizing, and an odious, stuck-up prig. I think there's a lot of projecting happening here for Eustace. And so we finally see land. But it's now dark, and Caspian thinks it's smart to wait to go on land until the morning. And Eustace has to put in his diary, of course, that idiot Caspian wouldn't let us go ashore because it was getting dark and he was afraid of savages and wild beasts. Now, if you're like me, you've probably had just about enough of Eustace, and what awaits us on the island would concern Eustace more than the rest of us. So we land on an island with mountainous cliffs encircling a bay. It is beautiful to look at, but it is inhabitable. Once on shore, we all drink and wash in the river, and then we eat and rest. The ship needs a lot of repair from the storm, so much that it is hardly recognizable. Eustace is laying under a tree, and he hears the plans we are all talking about, and he wonders if there will ever be any rest. So he gets up and climbs somewhere away from us. He's going off on his own. While doing this, he feels that he should hurry back to the ship in fear that we will leave without him. Now there was fog on the island, and as it lifts, he finds himself in an unknown valley with the sea nowhere to be seen. So Eustace has got himself lost, and he's in a valley. Meanwhile, we're all sitting and enjoying a meal when Edmund asks, "Where's Eustace?" The valley that Eustace is in is a huge pit or trench. All he could see was a pool of clear water 15 yards away, and he wonders if he'll be able to get out. Before he tries getting out, he decides to get a drink. Eustace hears a noise from behind him before he can take the drink, and it was a small noise, but it sounded loud in the immense silence around him. Hearing this, Eustace freezes. He looks and sees a low, dark hole, possibly the entrance of a cave, and there were two thin wisps of smoke coming from it. Now the noise was the loose stones beneath the dark hollow moving, just as if something behind them were crawling in the dark. Something was coming out. Edmund and Lucy would know what this was, but Eustace had read none of the right books. He sees a colored snout, then dreadful eyes, no feathers or fur, and a long, lithe body that trailed on the ground. The creature had elbows that went up higher than its back like a spider, and it looked like it had cruel claws. There were wings that made a rasping noise on the stones and had yards worth of tail. The lines of smoke he sees are coming from its nostrils. Now, if Eustace knew anything about dragons, he would be surprised by this one's behavior. This dragon was not sitting up and clapping its wings, nor was it shooting out a stream of flame from its mouth. In fact, the smoke from the nostrils seems like the smoke of a dying fire, and luckily it didn't seem to notice Edmund. It is moving slowly with many pauses. Even through his fear, Eustace was thinking that it was an old and sad creature. Eustace is afraid that if he moves, the dragon may come more to life. What was the use of trying to escape by climbing from a creature that could fly? Eustace thought to himself. The dragon is going for a drink, but before it drinks from the pool, it croaks, twitches, convulses, and rolls over. Eustace sees dark blood gushing from its mouth, and there is no more smoke coming from its nostrils. Eustace thinks that it may be trying to trick him, so he's still going to move slowly. But when he does, he gets up to it, touches it, and nothing happens. Eustace feels so relieved that he laughs out loud. It's quite hot out, so he steps over it so that he can drink. But before he finishes drinking, there is suddenly thunder, big drops of rain falling down. And Eustace was wet to the skin and half blinded with such rain as no one ever sees in Europe. There is no use in him trying to climb out of there like this, so Eustace goes to the dragon's cave for shelter and suddenly finds himself on top of treasure. Eustace never thought of treasure, but as he sees it, he thinks it would be useful to him in this new world. He would not need to pay tax, and with some of it he figures he could have a good time, and perhaps in the country of Calormen. Calormen seems the least phony to Eustace. So he fills his pockets with as much as he can carry, and then falls asleep while he waits for the rain to stop. Now this brings me to some scripture I want to read from Psalm 115, verses 1 to 11. Not unto us, O Lord, not unto us, but to your name give glory. Because of your mercy, because of your truth, why should the Gentiles say, so where is their God? But our God is in heaven. He does whatever he pleases. Their idols are silver and gold, the work of men's hands. They have mouths, but they do not speak. Eyes they have, but they do not see. They have ears, but they do not hear. Noses they have, but they do not smell. They have hands, but they do not handle. Feet they have, but they do not walk. Nor do they mutter through their throat. Those who make them are like them. So is everyone who trusts in them. O Israel, trust in the Lord. He is their help and their shield. O house of Aaron, trust in the Lord. He is their help and their shield. You who fear the Lord, trust in the Lord. He is their help and their shield. Eustace was having dragonish thoughts, like how he can hoard as much treasure as possible. And those who make idols will become like them. As humans, we are made to worship, and we will worship. But the question is, what or who will we worship? For Eustace, it was his self-image. And the dragon is a good metaphor for that, as well as for money and riches. Meanwhile, we finish eating with the others and are now starting the search for Eustace. Lucy suggests that we must do something and that maybe he got lost or fell in a hole or has been captured. Drinian suggests that he got killed by wild beasts, to which Rince says, good riddance if he is. You can tell we're all kind of tired of him, but I think this is a little unfair to wish that he's dead. Reepicheep says that while he was not friends with Eustace, he is of the Queen's blood, Lucy's, and we must avenge him if he is dead. I really like how C.S. Lewis wrote this part of the book because, as we will see, he gives the readers time to figure out what is happening before Eustace even knows what's happening. And so, as Eustace wakes up, he has a pain in his arm. And it was actually that pain that woke him up. And it was coming from a bracelet that he had put on his arm. And it was like, I guess it was too big to go around his wrist, so he put it up onto his arm so that it could fit. And speaking of bracelets, Faithful Fables has become an ambassador for free Luma bracelets. Bracelets with a Christian message, but also have an NFC reader on them that when you tap it to your phone, it opens up a portal that gives you daily Bible verses, devotions, mental health support, and a community of fellow believers that you can interact with. Use code STAYFAITHFUL, all one word, capital S, capital F, at checkout to save 15% on your order. Again, that's STAYFAITHFUL, all one word, capital S, capital F. You'll save 15% on your order. It's a great way to support a Christian company getting the gospel out to the world and to support your favorite podcast, Faithful Fables. The bracelet that Edmund had on was not one of these bracelets, it was a gold bracelet. And because he had put it up so high on his arm, it was causing his arm to have gotten swollen while he was asleep. Now Eustace sees something moving in the moonlight. It looks like a hideous shape. It looks like a dragon's claw and only moves when Eustace moves. He thinks that the dragon has a mate, and he then sees smoke coming up before his eyes, and Eustace holds his breath, and then the smoke vanishes. Eustace was crying from fear, and he was surprised at the size of his tears splashing in front of him on the treasure. Then he moves. The more he moves, Eustace is convinced that there is a dragon on either side of him now. He thinks that the dragons are actually mimicking him because he noticed them moving the same way he is. So he makes a run for it and leaves the cave and makes his way for the water, and he realizes that he's running on all fours. Then he bends down for the water, and he thinks he sees another dragon in the pool staring back at him. Eustace finally figures out that he, in fact, has become a dragon. And I think that's what I meant. Like, we can figure out what's happened before he does, and it was really beautifully written. And even though his arm is still in pain, he feels relief that there is not another dragon around. One of the first things he thinks is that he could now get back at Edmund and Caspian. However, he realizes that he doesn't want to. He wants to be friends with them, to talk, to laugh, to share things with them. He suddenly feels an appalling sense of loneliness come over him. Eustace longs for their voices and even a kind word from Reepicheep. Something interesting is happening to Eustace now that he's become a dragon. Eustace is in distress and cries his eyes out and decides to go back to the shore. He realizes now that his fears were misplaced and Caspian would actually never sail away without him. There was a physical transformation that happened to Eustace, and there was also a transformation that happened on the inside as well. It was like in this form, as a dragon, he was finally able to see himself for how he clearly is. Being a dragon personified his character and his attitudes, and he could finally see it. Before he gets back, he eats almost all of the dead dragon. His tastes and digestion are now more dragonish. And C.S. Lewis explains that dragons like to eat fresh dragon. So dragons are cannibals. And this is why we rarely see more than one dragon in the same country. So Eustace flies high above and sees the ship, and he goes to it. Meanwhile, back on shore, Lucy decides to stay out until the search party returns in hopes to hear good news about Eustace. But she is now asleep. The search party, which was led by Caspian, returns, and we learn that they saw a dead dragon, and they assure us that there are no more dragons. Lucy now gets gently woken up by Caspian, and they were mistaken because he is telling her that there is now a dragon between us and the ship. Caspian looks at Reepicheep, and before Reepicheep can even say anything, Caspian firmly tells him not to attempt any combat with the dragon, and that if Reepicheep disobeyed him, he would tie him up, which I thought was funny because even as we saw in Prince Caspian, Reepicheep always has this attack first mindset, and Caspian just knew it already. And so the plan is for us to battle the dragon, but Lucy thinks that maybe it will go away. And Eustace says that it would be worse then if he went away, because that would we would need to know where it is, and we wouldn't. And so the next morning, we all line up with our swords drawn. Lucy is in the middle and Reepicheep is on her shoulder. We are scared to battle it, and rightfully so, and it reminds me that C.S. Lewis had been in similar situations in his own life when he had been in war. Now, I don't know a lot about that stuff, but I can imagine that the night before going out to battle would be quite uncomfortable. And here we all feel closer to each other than we did before. And we are all feeling courageous, even in our fear. Now for it, friends, Caspian tells us. We know that our emotions cannot take over in this moment. Caspian is showing his great leadership, knowing exactly what to do, and tells us where to go and how it's going to happen. As we approach the dragon, it retreats instead of rising and blowing fire, which is uncharacteristic of a dragon. Lucy tells us that it looks like the dragon is crying, and the more we investigate, we learn that the dragon understands what we are saying. Reepicheep tells it to lift its foreleg above its head if it swears friendship with us. Once he saw that the dragon didn't want to fight, he shifts to talking to it instead, and he is okay with that. And I think Reepicheep's instincts here to go from fighting to talking when he sees that there is no threat are spot on. The dragon lifts his arm up clumsily because of the swelling from the bracelet. Lucy concludes that must be the reason that it's crying. She starts moving closer to it, and Caspian warns her to be careful. It's a clever dragon. Lucy tells the dragon she might be able to cure its paw. She is refusing to be held back from doing good, even for a dragon in need. Talk about loving your enemies. In this situation, the dragon is not our enemy, but we don't exactly know that yet. She looks like a girl, but she's acting like a queen. Now, obviously, we know that Eustace is the dragon, but the rest of them don't. And he remembers how her cordial cured his seasickness, so he gladly sticks his paw out. The dragon is disappointed. The cordial only reduced the swelling and pain, but the bracelet was still there. I guess Eustace was hoping that the cordial would cause the bracelet to come off, but I don't think that's how it works. The bracelet is a consequence of his greed and selfishness, and now he can feel the pain of his greediness as well as a reminder of the pain that he has caused others. "Look!" shouts Caspian as he sees the bracelet. "Look at what?" said Edmund. "Look at the device on the gold," said Caspian. "A little hammer with a diamond above it, like a star," said Drinian. "Why, I've seen that before." "Seen it?" said Caspian. "Why, of course you have. It is the sign of a great Narnian house. This is the Lord Octesian's arm ring." "Villain!" said Reepicheep to the dragon. "Have you devoured a Narnian lord?" But the dragon shook his head violently. "Or perhaps," said Lucy, "this is the Lord Octesian, turned into a dragon, under an enchantment, you know." "It needn't be either," said Edmund. "All dragons collect gold. But I think it's a safe guess that Octesian got no farther than this island." "Are you the Lord Octesian?" said Lucy to the dragon, and then, when it sadly shook its head, "Are you someone enchanted? Someone human, I mean?" It nodded violently. And then someone said, people disputed afterward, whether Lucy or Edmund said it first, "You're not Eustace by any chance?" And Eustace nodded his terrible dragon head and thumped his tail in the sea, and everyone skipped back. Some of the sailors, with ejaculations I will not put down in writing, to avoid the enormous and boiling tears which flowed from his eyes. Caspian recognized that the gold ring on the dragon's arm belongs to the Lord Octesian, the second lost lord of Narnia. We see that there is a little hammer with a diamond above it like a star, which is the sign of a great Narnian house on the bracelet. Reepicheep asks the dragon if it ate Octesian, and Lucy suggests that this may in fact be Octesian under a spell. Edmund is saying that it doesn't have to be either because all dragons collect gold. And Lucy asks the dragon if it is Octesian, and the dragon shakes its head. So now Lucy asks if it's a human under an enchantment, and the dragon nods its head. We are not sure if it was Edmund or Lucy who asks, but one of them asked the dragon if it was Eustace, and it nods its head. So over the next couple of days, he tries to write in the sand so he can communicate with us, but he is unable to. The muscles and nerves of the claws were not built for writing. So seeing Eustace as a dragon, we can all tell that his character was improving by becoming a dragon. And we also notice that he was suddenly anxious to help. He is bringing us many carcasses and provisions. He is a humane killer, only using his tail, and he eats alone because it seems like he doesn't want us to see him eating his food raw. The only thing keeping Eustace from despair is the new pleasure he finds in being liked, as well as liking others. Eustace was learning about himself and becoming self-aware, but also realizing that people can like him and that he can like people as well. Now, as a boy, Eustace was never able to connect with anyone because of the way he behaved. He recognized that he was the monster and others weren't. We also see that he is afraid to be alone with himself and ashamed to be with us. Reepicheep is now his most constant comforter. He tells him stories of other people who fell from prosperity to distress and that they recovered and lived happily ever after. Eustace will never forget this act of kindness from Reepicheep. We are all trying to figure out what to do about Eustace. Eustace discovered in himself that he has been an unmitigated nuisance from the start, and that he is an even greater nuisance now. This realization ate into his mind, similar to how the bracelet was eating into his foreleg. On the 6th day on Dragon Island, Edmund wakes up early and he hears something moving. He is wondering if there maybe are natives on the island after all. Then he thinks that it's Caspian, because whatever it was seems to be the same size as Caspian, but yet Caspian is sleeping beside him. Edmund grabs his sword and goes to investigate. Edmund sees that it is a person, and the stranger talks to Edmund, and Edmund learns that the stranger is Eustace. Eustace asks Edmund if they could go and talk somewhere because he didn't want to meet the rest of us just yet. He tells Edmund that he does not want to tell him how he became a dragon, but that he would rather share how he became a boy again. He didn't even know that he was a dragon until he heard all of us using the word. "Fire ahead," said Edmund. "Well, last night I was more miserable than ever, and that beastly arm ring was hurting like anything. Is that all right now?" Eustace laughed, a different laugh from any Edmund had heard him give before, and slipped the bracelet easily off his arm. "There it is," he said, "and anyone who likes can have it as far as I'm concerned. Well, as I say, I was laying awake and wondering what on earth would become of me. And then, but, mind you, it may have all been a dream, I don't know." "Go on," said Edmund, with considerable patience. "Well, anyway, I looked up and saw the very last thing I expected, a huge lion coming slowly toward me. And one queer thing was that there was no moon last night, but there was moonlight where the lion was. So it came nearer and nearer. I was terribly afraid of it. You may think that, being a dragon, I could have knocked any lion out easily enough, but it wasn't that kind of fear. It wasn't afraid of eating me. I was just afraid of it, if you can understand. Well, it came close up to me and looked straight into my eyes, and I shut my eyes tight. And that wasn't any good, because it told me to follow it." "You mean it spoke?" "I don't know. Now that you mention it, I don't think it did. But it told me all the same. And I knew I'd have to do what it told me. So I got up and followed it. And it led me a long way into the mountains. And there was also this moonlight over and around the lion wherever he went. So at last we came to the top of a mountain I'd never seen, and on top of this mountain there was a garden, trees and fruit and everything. In the middle of it was a well. I knew it was a well because you could see the water bubbling up from the bottom of it. But it was a lot bigger than most wells, like a very big, round bath with marble steps going down into it. The water was as clear as anything, and I thought if I could get in there and bathe, it would ease the pain in my leg. But the lion told me I must undress first. Mind you, I don't know if he said any words out loud or not. I was just going to say that I couldn't undress because I hadn't any clothes on, when suddenly I thought that dragons are snaky sort of things, and snakes can cast their skins. Oh, of course, thought I. That's what the lion means. So I started scratching myself, and my scales began coming off all over the place. And then I scratched a little deeper, and instead of just scales coming off, here and there, my whole skin started peeling off beautifully, like it does after an illness, or as if I was a banana. In a minute or two, I just stepped out of it. I could see it laying there beside me, looking rather nasty. It was the most lovely feeling, so I started to go down into the well for my bathe. But just as I was going to put my feet into the water, I looked down and saw that they were all hard and rough and wrinkled and scaly, just as they had been before. "Oh, that's all right," said I. "It only means I had another smaller suit on underneath the first one, and I'll have to get out of it too." So I scratched and tore again, and this underskin peeled off beautifully, and out I stepped and left it laying beside the other one and went down to the well for my bathe. Well, exactly the same thing happened again, and I thought to myself, oh dear, how many skins have I got to take off? For I was longing to bathe my leg. So I scratched away for the third time, and got off a third skin, just like the two others, and stepped out of it. But as soon as I looked at myself in the water, I knew it had been no good. Then the lion said, but I don't know if it spoke, "You will have to let me undress you." I was afraid of his claws, I can tell you, but I was pretty nearly desperate now. So I just lay flat down on my back and let him do it. The very first tear he made was so deep that I thought it had gone right into my heart. And when he began pulling the skin off, it hurt worse than anything I've ever felt. The only thing that made me able to bear it was just the pleasure of feeling the stuff peel off. You know, if you've ever picked the scab off of a sore place, it hurts like billy-o, but it is such fun to see it coming away. "I know exactly what you mean," said Edmund. Well, he peeled the beastly stuff right off, just as I thought I'd done it myself the other 3 times, only they hadn't hurt. And there I was, laying on the grass, only ever so much thicker and darker and more knobbly looking than the others had been. And there I was, as smooth and soft as a peeled switch and smaller than I had been. Then he caught hold of me. I didn't like that very much, for I was very tender underneath now that I'd had no skin on, and threw me into the water. It smarted like anything, but only for a moment. After that, it became perfectly delicious, and as soon as I started swimming and splashing, I found that all the pain had gone from my arm. And then I saw why. I'd turned into a boy again. You'd think me simply phony if I told you how I felt about my own arms. I know they've no muscle and are pretty moldy compared with Caspian's, but I was so glad to see them. After a bit, the lion took me out and dressed me. Dressed you? With his paws? Well, I don't exactly remember that bit, but he did somehow or other, in new clothes, the same I've got on now, as a matter of fact. Then suddenly I was back here. which is what makes me think it must have been a dream. No, it wasn't a dream, said Edmund. Why not? Well, there are the clothes, for one thing. And you have been, well, undragoned for another. What do you think it was, then? Asked Eustace. I think you've seen Aslan, said Edmund. Aslan? Said Eustace. I've heard that name mentioned several times since we joined the Dawn Treader, and I felt, I don't know what. I hated it, but I was hating everything then. And by the way, I'd like to apologize. I'm afraid I've been pretty beastly. That's all right, said Edmund. Between ourselves, you haven't been as bad as I was on my first trip to Narnia. You were only an ass, but I was a traitor. Well, don't tell me about it then, said Eustace. But who is Aslan? Do you know him? Well, he knows me, said Eustace. He is the great lion, the son of the Emperor beyond the sea, who saved me and saved Narnia. We've all seen him. Lucy sees him most often, and it may be Aslan's country we are sailing to. Neither said anything for a while. The last bright star had vanished, and though they could not see the sunrise because of the mountains on their right, they knew it was going on because the sky above them and the bay before them turned the color of roses. Then some bird of the parrot kind screamed in the wood behind them. They heard movements among the trees, and finally a blast on Caspian's horn. The camp was astir. All right, so it's here that we see how Eustace's transformation happened. So Eustace explains that he was laying awake and he saw a huge lion coming toward him. Now he mentions that, well, actually, I should say, the fact that Eustace saw the lion as being huge actually says something because he himself is a huge dragon, right? And he mentions that there was no moon in the sky, but there was moonlight wherever the lion was. He mentions that he is not afraid of the lion eating him, he was just afraid of it. Now the lion looks at him in the eye and tells him to follow, and Eustace had a feeling that he had to do what it said, and so he follows it up to a mountaintop that had a garden with trees and fruit. Now I want to mention here that I believe that Eustace, he could have still chosen not to follow. He felt like he had to do it. I feel like that was just, he was so convinced by everything happening that he felt that he must do it. But anyways, he's up on this mountain, and I'll mention a little bit later why that is significant, but there's a garden and there's a big well in the middle of it. Now, Eustace is unsure if the lion is actually speaking to him audibly or if he could just somehow hear the lion speaking. But it was clear as day. And the lion tells him to undress before bathing in the pool. And this meant that he would have to shed his skin. And so Eustace starts to scratch his skin and the scales are coming off. And so he scratches deeper and the skin peels off beautifully. He steps out of the skin and walks into the pool and realizes that the skin and scales are back. So he repeats the process 2 more times, but the same results happen both other times. Now, all 3 times this has happened, and you would think that 3rd time's the charm, but it wasn't. The lion tells Eustace that he will have to let the lion undress him. Now, Eustace is afraid of the claws, but he's desperate and he submits it to the lion. Now, the first tear that the lion made was deep enough that it felt like it went straight into his heart. Now, I see the significance here because Aslan needed to get to the root of the problem, which of course was Eustace's heart. Now, when the skin was pulled off, it was the worst pain that Eustace had ever experienced. In comparison to when Eustace took the skin off for himself, it didn't hurt. But when the lion took it off, it did hurt. Now, the pain that we sometimes feel from healing is a required pain that we must go through in order to heal. It is a good pain. And when we attempt to correct ourselves, it is oftentimes difficult to go deep enough to get to the real change that we need. It has to come from the help of God to get that change. And as we see that, we see that personified here. Eustace even asks himself, how many skins will I have to take off? Much like we may ask ourselves, how many times am I going to deal with the same problems? Eustace was tender because of the lack of skin, so he did not like it when the lion grabbed him and threw him into the water. Now, when Eustace began swimming and splashing in the water, the pain in his arm was gone. And notice that C.S. Lewis mentioned the pain in his arm was gone, not the pain in his foreleg. He switched back and forth from, like, he used foreleg when he was the dragon, and now he was using arm again. And this was because Eustace was a boy again. I just thought that was a nice little thing that, like a little detail that he threw in there. Eustace was happy to see his underwhelming and moldy arms again. And we see the symbolism here to baptism. And now going forward, we will also experience Eustace's sanctification as well. So we see baptism and sanctification. And I think C.S. Lewis is just, there's so much imagery here, guys. It's so beautiful. But the lion dresses him now in new clothes. And Eustace in an instant, he finds himself back on the shore thinking it was a dream. Now, speaking of symbolism, I had heard a couple other takes on this from other people, and there was one that I thought of for myself that I think fits very well. And what I found was Matthew 9, verse 16 to 17. It says, "No one puts a piece of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, for the patch pulls away from the garment, and the tear is made worse. Nor do they put new wine into old wineskins, or else the wineskins break. The wine is spilled, and the wineskins are ruined. But they put new wine into new wineskins, and both are preserved." Now, in this passage, Jesus is illustrating that he did not come to repair or reform their old institutions, but rather to give them a new covenant. The new does not improve the old. It replaces it beyond what we can think. When Jesus mentions the wineskins, he was saying to them that their current institutions could and would not contain the new wine that he offers. His new wine would bring Jew and Gentile together in a new body. The old and stagnant cannot be renewed. He came to introduce something new, not fix something that is old. And this is what salvation is all about. Much like Jesus does not destroy the old covenant, but instead fulfills it, we see that the old Eustace is in a sense gone, but his purpose is being fulfilled in greatness. In his current condition, Eustace could not contain the new wine that Aslan had for him. Eustace needed to experience this transformation so that he could fulfill the potential greatness that was in store for him. If he didn't submit the situation to Aslan, it may not have ever happened. Edmund explains to Eustace that this was not a dream, and the reason for that is because of the clothes that Eustace was now wearing and the fact that he wasn't a dragon anymore. Edmund is using his logic to show Eustace that this is real. He also explains to Eustace that the lion is Aslan. Now, Eustace heard that name on the ship, and at that time he hated the name, but he also hated everything at that time. Showing more growth, Eustace then apologizes to Edmund, and Edmund forgives him and tells Eustace that he was not as bad as Edmund was on his first trip to Narnia. He tells Eustace that he was a traitor before, and Eustace tells him that they don't need to talk about it. Just like Aslan said in Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the past is in the past. And this may be the same reason why Eustace didn't want to share how he became a dragon, because it involved sin, and he wanted to leave that in the past after this experience with Aslan. Now, I think it is more significant that this conversation happens between Eustace and Edmund instead of Lucy, because Lucy is already such a forgiving person. For Edmund to forgive means there must have been real change in Eustace. It is also because Edmund has gone through a transformation of his own, and now he and Eustace can for the first time bond over their shared experiences. He is able to give Eustace a second chance, just like he was given one as well. It is a really powerful thing for Edmund to be part of this redemption story for Eustace. He was Edmund the Just, after all. Now, it appears to me that hearing Eustace's story reminded Edmund of his own story, and that Eustace needed to feel the power of being a dragon in order to realize that power was not what was going to save him from his fears. Edmund explains that Aslan saved Edmund and Narnia. Now, I like how, I have to make a correction here too from when I read from the book, but I like how Edmund doesn't say that he knows Aslan, but that Aslan knows him. Now, when I recorded reading from the book, I did say that Eustace said that, but it was in fact Edmund. My bad. But yeah, when Eustace asks Edmund if he knows Aslan, he doesn't say that he does. Instead, he says that Aslan knows him. And I thought that was interesting. And I feel like the same is true for God, that he completely knows us, and we have only just begun to know God. Now, he also explains that Lucy sees Aslan most often out of everyone, which is true. We've noticed that. Even in Prince Caspian, she saw him before anyone else did. And so from this day forth, Eustace was a different boy. He will still have relapses, and there will be days that he will be tiresome, but the cure had begun. It was a process. The transformation was not an instant, but it was a long-term process for him to become a better person, much like we have seen for Edmund in the previous two books. And really, I think that's just what sanctification is. Now we are being made more like Christ, and we're not going to be perfect at it. We're still going to fall short, but it's a process and it's a daily thing, and that's what Eustace is going through. Now, I mentioned before something about the mountain, so Aslan led Eustace to a mountain. The mountain is significant because we see a lot of supernatural events in Scripture occurring on mountains. Moses speaking to God in the burning bush and receiving the 10 Commandments on Mount Horeb, and Jesus' transfiguration also happened on a mountain, just to name a few. Now, I don't have time in this podcast, but there is significance to why supernatural events happen on a mountaintop, but I also haven't fully researched that for myself yet, but there are certain things that, if there's interest, we can get to it in another episode. But now back with the others. We see Edmund and now the restored Eustace coming for breakfast. We all celebrate his return. Now, we are not sure if the other dragon ate Octesian or if it was Octesian, although I'm convinced that Lord Octesian fell for the same fate as Eustace did in the treasure hoard, but more on that in a future episode. The jewels that Eustace had filled his pockets with had vanished with his new clothes, and he felt no desire to go back for the treasure. Now, a few days later, the ship repairs are fixed, and we're ready to depart. But before we go, Caspian leaves this inscription on a smooth cliff facing the woods. Dragon Island, discovered by Caspian X, King of Narnia, etc. In the 4th year of his reign. Here, as we suppose, the Lord Octesian had his death. No one wanted Octesian's armoring, and Caspian flung it into the air, and it landed on a projection on the rock that no one could climb up or down to retrieve it. With all this occurring, and the Dawn Treader ready to go, we set sail and continue our voyage. But that is for next time. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode of Faithful Fables. A lot happened while on Dragon Island, and the most impactful was what happened to Eustace. What we experienced with Aslan, or what he experienced with Aslan, showed us the shedding of Eustace's selfish old nature and initiated his redemption, as well as him earning the respect and fellowship of his companions on the voyage. What an amazing illustration of God's love and provision for all of us. Now, please leave a comment and a rating. It just helps the episode get in front of more people, and it can share God's love and the gospel message to more people as well. If you are on YouTube, please consider subscribing. It's totally free and you can change your mind at any time. Leave a like as well. And remember to get your bracelets at Free Luma Bracelets. And with all that said, thank you. And until next time, stay faithful.